Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this new video in which we continue our close reading of Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer's book, Dialectic of Enlightenment. Last time we concluded the first chapter of the book, the concept of enlightenment, and I said that I'm going to jump right into the culture industry, which is the fourth chapter of the book. Normally after seeing the concept of enlightenment, we should do the two excursuses because I'm skipping two chapters since I'm going to jump into the culture industry, and those two chapters are the excursuses that come right after the concept of enlightenment. But I decided to do a close reading of the most important essay of the book before, and that is the culture industry. Usually people know the Dialectic of Enlightenment mostly through the chapter on the culture industry. I mean, this is the most famous concept of the book of Adorno and Horkheimer. I'm going to go back to the excursuses sooner or later, either after I finish the culture industry or after the chapter that comes next, the fifth chapter, the elements of anti-Semitism. But since the culture industry is the most important chapter, and it's actually logical to jump right into it, because when we talked about the concept of enlightenment, we ended with this notion of enlightenment being mass deception, and that happens to be the subtitle of the culture industry. The culture industry's subtitle is enlightenment as mass deception, so that's how it relates to enlightenment. That's the title of the essay, called The Culture Industry, Enlightenment as Mass Deception. So let's dive into the culture industry. Now, it's a long chapter, it's a long essay, about 40 pages long, and it has 7 sections. So I'm going to make 7 videos dedicated to it, and each video is going to be covering a section. So the sections vary in terms of size. They range from 5 pages to 10 pages. So expect videos from 50 minutes to 2 hours long to cover, the whole chapter. So let's dive into it. So what is meant by enlightenment being mass deception? So what is meant by mass deception? Well, first, the essay opens with a statement that there is a sociological belief about pre-capitalist societies. Before capitalism became a thing in Europe, societies were mainly organized around religion and a simple division of labor. By simple, I mean that you didn't really have specialization in which every single step in an activity is done by someone. Of course, you had specialties in the sense that you have someone who is a butcher, another person is an architect, another is a doctor, a sculptor, etc. But let's say that you didn't really have a strict division between the steps to do something. Like, for example, the butcher can also be a shepherd, or at least the butcher and the shepherd, they know each other. They are very close to each other. So it can be the same person who breeds the cattle, then kills them and sells them at the market. So the process of producing meat can be made by one or just a few people, and the few people can actually know each other. They come from the same community, they are from the same village. Everyone knows everybody. With specialization, the process gets divided into many small activities, and each one is assigned to just one person who keeps repeating it over and over again. And so the problem with this is that it has an impact on people's social relations. Like, the village butcher has ties with the rest of the community, like we said, because his activity makes him very present in the lives of others. They have also knowledge about agriculture. They're mostly outdoors on the fields. They see other people and they interact with them. Like, the butcher knows the people who will buy the meat, etc., etc. But with specialization, you don't have as many social relations anymore. Like, the butcher now receives the meat from a slaughterhouse, and he just sells the meat. He doesn't know the people who are killing the animals in there, and these people are confined all day to just one task. Like, they just stand still with a knife, and the animals are just being dragged through a chain, and they just slit their throats over and over again. And so specialization of course, came with industrialization, since the increase of production means that the process must be optimized to produce not just more, but more in a shorter amount of time. So with specialization, you produce more and in shorter periods. So specialization would impact negatively the nature of our social relations, and it would lead to isolation, and the issue with isolation, besides the psychological turmoil, is that it means that now each individual will kind of have to make their own little truth, being cut off from the outside world, from others. People are no longer obliged to confine themselves to objective truth. You live alone, so you do whatever you want. It's kind of like that. So a loss of social ties on the one hand, and on the other there's also a loss of objectivity. And so the second loss is often associated with religious decline, like capitalist societies. Even though God, is still around, the capitalist societies, they have limited the role of religion, and religion was thought to be, besides a tool for social cohesion, it was supposed to be the guide for objective truth and for morality. So from this, the sociological belief that if societies lose religion and their tradition, they will fall into chaos, like everyone will be different, since everyone can make their own truth, and so social cohesion will be impossible. And so capitalist societies become chaotic because, well, everyone can make up their own truth now. And but then, Theodor, Adorno and Horkheimer say that this sociological belief is actually refuted by everyday experience. Like this belief was just, was just false. Actually, it was just, something that people were theorizing, that they were kind of predicting that this is what happens. But Theodor, Adorno say that we don't really say that. We don't really see that when you look at everyday experience. You just need to walk around in the streets and you will see that everything. You will see everything except difference. On the contrary, they say culture today is infecting everything with sameness. Film, radio, and magazine form a system. Each brand of culture is unanimous within itself, and all are unanimous together. Even the aesthetic manifestations of political opposites proclaim the same inflexible rhythm. So, for a theory that proclaimed that we will get into chaos because people won't be the same anymore, it turns out that everyone is not only becoming the same, but everything is becoming the same. Like capitalism didn't lead to a heterogeneity of society, but on the opposite, an increasing homogeneity. And this is because the culture produced by capitalism, and of course by capitalism we mean Enlightenment, so the culture produced through film, radio, magazines, etc., so the media in general, which also includes literature, art, science, but it's mostly focused on mainstream media. So this culture is not encouraging difference, it's not encouraging subjectivity, like some sociologists thought that it would, but it is encouraging sameness to the level of unanimity. So unanimous basically means without names, so make sure to link this with the issue of proper names that we discussed in the first essay on the concept of enlightenment. So basically this culture makes anyone indistinguishable from everyone. So culture is basically about conforming. We make everyone the same without individuality. This is what we mean by you are anonymous. Like you don't have a proper name, you don't have an individuality. There is nothing that distinguishes you from everyone else. So individuals are like the culture that they consume. By saying that every branch of culture is anonymous within itself, we mean that all movies look alike, all songs sound the same, all magazines are the same, and by being so, movies, songs, and magazines, despite being different branches of culture, they're actually the same. No movie has its individuality among movies, and movies have no individuality among the other branches of culture. So all of culture becomes a system, and by system we mean that everything within culture or produced by that culture is anonymous. It obeys the same totalizing pattern. So everything is produced by the same principle, it obeys the same laws, etc. Like everything is just a copy of the system. You know, everything is a manifestation of the same rhythm. And hence, even when there are oppositions, like for example in politics, they only have the appearance of opposition. Like two candidates are battling each other with all their might, but in truth, they have exactly the same objectives. And so you can see this, for example, with architecture. I mean, they use the example of architecture to illustrate this. Like things seem different only on the surface, which again is very convenient for an ideology that states that there is nothing beyond surfaces. Now remember, that's what we said about enlightenment. For enlightenment, there are nothing beyond surfaces. And so on the surface, everything seems different, everything has a name, but these are mere aesthetic effects of a totalizing system. They are basically brands, each competing to distinguish itself from other brands, but they all perpetuate the same system. And so likewise, all architecture styles may all claim to be unique and different, each trying to reflect the uniqueness of its country, for example, of its culture. But as they write, the decorative, administrative, and exhibition building of industry differ little between authoritarian and other countries. So here the asterisk in the refers to the to a change between the 1944 edition and 1947. In the 1944 edition, it refers to the International Exposition of the Art and Technology in Modern Life that took place in 1937 in Paris. Like you had many countries who got into artistic and architectural contests, and so you had the building of pavilions that each would glorify the said country. So it was in 1937. So you had Nazi Germany there. They had their own pavilion in front of that of the USSR. The communists were leading voices in the fight against fascism, but as the comment of Adorno and Horkheimer suggests, their opposition is simply, surface level. There's a picture actually where you can see both facing each other in front of the Eiffel Tower. You had also the Italian, the Swiss, the Dutch, the Polish, the Finnish, the British, the Canadian, the Romanian, and even the Norwegian pavilion. And so the authors in 1944 were specifically talking about that exposition, but they also meant something in general. Like you had these styles of architecture that may look different, but they are inherently, they are inherently about the same culture. Like they don't differ on a fundamental level, which implies that both authoritarian and democratic countries are actually the same. They're not really that different. They are both produced from the same principle. So both the architecture of Nazi Germany or Canada or even the Soviet Union are modeled on the same rhythm. So both countries, one authoritarian, the other democratic, are the product of the same thinking, the same ideology, and that is the fascist ideology of progress. Like we said, enlightenment is about getting results, about getting what you want. It's about lying, manipulating for the gain of power and self-preservation, and so nothing else really matters. And so this is what is called the entrepreneurial system. Entrepreneurs don't care about nothing but increasing their profit margins, and as such, their ideology needs to be reflected within the architecture that must capture this new spirit. And so the state, of course, is encouraging this. It is promoting the entrepreneurial mindset. It legitimizes it under the guise of progress. That without it, we would fall back into barbarism of myth and into nature, etc. So progress must be everywhere. It must invade all spaces so that no one can dare to oppose it. When we see progress everywhere, well, you take progress as the only available option for life. There are no other alternatives for existence other than what the state and the entrepreneurial system decide upon as progress. So the architecture is supposed to capture this, and Adorno and Horkheimer describe the contrast between this invading new style of architecture when you compare it to the old buildings. They write, the bright monumental structure shooting up on all sides show off the systematic ingenuity of the system spanning combines, toward which the unfettered entrepreneurial system, whose monuments are the dismal residential and commercial blocks in the surrounding areas, of the desolate cities was already swiftly advancing. The older building around around the concrete centers already look like slums, and the new bungalows on the outskirts, like the flimsy structures at international trade fairs, sing the praises of technological progress while inviting their users to throw them away after short use like tin cans. So through the architecture, now that is shooting up on all sides, the authors convey that there is a loss of identity. Progress, like we said, doesn't really care about identity since it sees it as a nominalist conception, and so as such progress shoots on all sides, meaning that you must find it everywhere. Everything must conform to it, and as a result you have an uncontrolled spread of an ideology that ends up looking like nothing because it lacks all sense of structure. It's all chaotic, like the unfettered entrepreneurial system, and it is systematic, like, you know, the state. And so these new buildings, they take up the center from which their influence can spread, and already they start, you know, highlighting their hierarchy. They are at the center, while the other buildings that surround it are like slums. And so it's like a dystopian future where the mass population live in slums, while the rich live at the center, from which, you know, they can control all movements of the population. And then you have these new bungalows that, according to the authors, they convey the idea of usefulness. A bungalow is like, you know, a temporary construction made for a small use, and then it is thrown away once its usefulness is over. Like, it's not built with the intention that it will last, or at least, you know, the people living in it won't live there for a long time. And even if they do, the architecture of the bungalow always suggests that eventually they will have to move out. So the style of architecture needs to be minimal, like, you know, Le Corbusier, who Adorno hates because his style is all about, you know, just efficiency. There is no beauty in Le Corbusier, and without beauty, Adorno and Horkheimer wonder what can stand in front of progress. You know, like, a landscape is beautiful, but for progress, a landscape simply means space for factories and mines. It means, you know, energy to fuel cars, planes, trains, etc. So everything must be made in the image of usefulness. When I see a landscape, I don't want to see trees, grass, animals, sky, clouds, beauty, etc. I see tables, I see chairs, I see meat, and so this perception is then transposed to individuals themselves. They all must be alike in the sense of being useful or usable. And so hence we come to the paradox of Enlightenment. It championed individual autonomy, but only to the extent that that autonomy is useful. Like before Enlightenment, individuals' potential was crushed or left undeveloped, but it turned out that the potential in question is only valued insofar as it extract, you know, coal, for example, from mines. And so likewise, the architecture also reflects this paradox. It's supposed to convey potential, dynamism, movement, youth, vitality, creativity, with its impressive, you know, buildings, but also it conveys autonomy through the building of small not autonomy, but atomization. When, you know, you automatize, atomization. When you atomize a society, you know, when you separate, you know, individuals and you make them into small units that cannot, you know, interact with each other. And so it also conveys this through the building of small apartments, for example. Like, apartments are, after all, designed for individuals who have no ties with each other. Each gets to live in their small little world in which they can be whomever they want. They can personalize it without you know, caring about their family's tradition or religion, for example. Like, it's my apartment, it's, you know, it's supposed to reflect my identity. But again, the architecture, like that of the bungalow, suggests that you cannot own the apartment, since individuality also comes with the idea of movement. You cannot live forever in an apartment, so you get isolated, you you get isolation disguised as freedom, and you get usefulness disguised as movement. So you are autonomous, you are free and dynamic only insofar as it increases the capital of the center. And so in short, we allow you to live, to live up to your potential, but we have to exploit that potential. That's the only condition for you to actually be able to live up to your potential. Okay, like, okay, you can live up to your potential, but you have to let us exploit that potential, otherwise we won't let you live up to your potential. Quote, but the town planning projects, which are supposed to perpetuate individuals as autonomous units in hygienic small apartments, subjugate them only more completely to their adversary, the total power of capital. So the new buildings, the piles and piles of apartments, end up forming some sort of beehive in which each bee has its own, designated task, and capital is like the queen of the hive. We therefore have this philosophy of dilemma that we already encountered in the concept of enlightenment. It's either autonomy in capital or it is death. Like capital says, if you want autonomy, you must submit to me, but with your submission, I will guarantee that you will have comfort and pleasure. That's what you want, right? That's what you want. You want your autonomy. That's your idea of autonomy, right? And all you have to do is just lose your identity and embrace, sameness. So this is how capital, this is how you get this idea, this philosophy of dilemma. It's either this or that. So therefore, individuality and autonomy are coordinated by capital, like toy companies that produce many dolls with different clothes, sizes, haircuts and skin colors, but they are all the same dolls, right? So capital does the same to individuals. It confines them in their own egoism, and so reduces them to their small unit so that they can be easily manageable. Like apartments, we can be piled up on top of one another, basically like cattle. When you look at the flock of sheep, for example, you don't really see what makes each sheep like itself, right? Like they all look alike. They all can be exchanged and replaced by any other individual sheep. They simply become, numbers made to be useful only for the time to be fed in order to be eaten. And so individuals must also be like that as well in this capitalist system. They must be denied any sense of depth. All of their identity needs to remain superficial and minimal so that they can be easily managed, so that they can be, flattened with advertising and conspicuous consumption. And so what modern architecture is doing is the same thing that we do to cattle. Like each cow becomes the cattle, each sheep becomes the flock. So neither the cow nor the sheep are distinguished from the group or has an identity of its own. And so there is a confusion between the macrocosm and the microcosm. Like individuals are therefore the same as the collective. Quote, the conspicuous unity of macrocosm and microcosm confronts human beings with a model of their culture, the false identity of universal and particular. So the core idea of the culture industry is to manufacture this false identity. Like, the textile industry is to manufacture textile through exploiting, labor. The culture industry manufactures culture through the reproduction of this false identity of universal and particular, of the idea, it's this idea of sameness. Like the universal and the particular becomes, the same thing. And what is tricky about the culture industry is that it doesn't really hide it. Like it doesn't hide its desire to make everything identical, but it openly affirms it because it actually increases its power. I mean, once capital has established itself, once the principle of self-preservation gained its hegemonic influence, there is no point in concealing it anymore, right? this is like when in 1991, after the fall of the Soviet Union, capitalism proclaimed itself to be the only real alternative, like communism died, so capitalism is the only reality now. Once you know that no one will dare to think of alternatives to capitalism unless they take the risk of, you know, believing in superstition, of being dreamers, then nothing prevents you you know, I mean, you won't have any reasons to shy away from admitting that you exploit people. You know, I mean, you know that no one is going to think of an alternative, so now you can do whatever you want. And this is the same thing here, because Enlightenment proved itself to be effective. It won't shy away from telling it like it is. What are you going to do in front of Enlightenment? You are going to hold some enchanted talisman. You are going to use philosophy, art. I mean, those things don't put food on the table, right? They don't make money. They don't make the stock market more competitive. And so whenever you try to criticize the culture industry, you are hit with the same old shit, the same old, it gets results, you know, it is business, that's what people like, it's progress, etc. Whenever someone complains about the quality of what is produced in film or radio, they are hit with the idea that films and radios are businesses. Like, companies don't have time to waste with beauty, with elaborating complex scenarios, exploring deep ideas, etc. They just want to get paid and get more money. And that's it. As they write, films and radio no longer need to present themselves as art. The truth that they are nothing but business is used as an ideology to legitimize the trash they intentionally produce. They call themselves industries, and the published figures for their directors' incomes quell any doubt about the social necessity of their finished products. So basically, the discourse goes as follows. You say, there, I made a movie, the movie made tons of money at the box office, so I don't give a shit if it's art. My movie is more useful to society by grossing so much than any other work of art. Plus, we have the technological means to reproduce it over and over again. See how many entries it made. See how many people enjoyed walking in the theater to watch my movie. This is what they want, instead of, you know, some far-fetched stuff that they won't get anyways. So we can produce it again and again, make even more money. They get what they want. I mean, about the audience, the audience gets what they want to watch, and we get more money out of it, so that we can use it to give them more of what they want to watch, so everybody wins. So why the fuck should we, you know, bother with philosophy, and what the fuck is wrong with philosophers and artists who always complain about this? So this is basically the discourse that is usually heard to legitimize the culture industry. It bases itself on the fact that this is all aligned with the needs of the consumers, and that it's all just business. Today, whenever you want to be exempted from any responsibility, all you have to do is just say, well, it's just for business. If you frame everything as it is business, then you can get away with anything, because no one will dare to stop business. You know, like, no one can dare tell you cannot work for your own self-preservation. So business becomes some sort of inherent necessity that, if threatened, tomorrow we will return to living in caves. Right, so again, this is the dilemma. Either, you know, we make everything into a business, or tomorrow we go back to living in caves. And so, if we question this business mentality, then we become an idealist who lives in the clouds. Whereas we know we need people who have, you know, their feet on the ground, who are realists. And so this is a very convenient strategy for anyone who wants to keep its power on technology, right? Like, the main issue is why technology is used for only this particular purpose of creating more of the same. But, you know, the debate will be framed differently, so that we don't have the opportunity to think about whose interests are being served here. The needs of the consumer, business and technology are all part of a manipulation strategy. To quote Adorno and Horkheimer again, in reality, a cycle of manipulation and retroactive need is unifying the system ever more tightly. What is not mentioned is that the basis on which technology is gaining power over society is the power of those whose economic position in society is strongest. Technical rationality today is the rationality of domination. So, like, the thing not mentioned more precisely is the fact that those who are the strongest use their power to influence the use of technology. They use their economic position to hold power over technology. Producers, because they have the money, prefer funding movies that don't question the system in which they have a privileged position, right? So in their discourse, they won't point to the fact that their economic position allows them to have this much control. They'd rather point to other facts, like for example merit. They are the strongest because they are the strongest. You know, they are where they are because they made more efforts, because you know they are smarter or stuff like that. And if there is something that meritocracies have taught us, is never to blame the strongest. And so, having internalized the ideology of self-preservation, by all means, of the survival of the fittest, we find it impossible to oppose it as a principle unless we are insane, right? Like no one in the right mind would oppose the principle of self-preservation. So the films and songs that we consume are all part of this totalizing strategy to make the principle of self-preservation, the principle of its own business, ubiquitous, meaning that it's present everywhere. And so wherever you look, you won't see anything else but this mentality. And so since it is ubiquitous, we cannot fight against it. And therefore, whenever someone in power says that what they are doing is for the economy, their technological planning appears rational. We cannot say anything about how they use technology, so the rationalization of their use and control over technology is actually a rationalization of their domination over the rest of the population. And so using technology for the production of works of art is associated with irrationality, with waste of time and of resources. So the only utility left for technology is the reproduction over and over again of business ideology and of self-preservation. So the purpose of technology is just standardization and mass production and nothing else. And so this, of course, needs to be taken with a critical mind, as they say. These adverse effects, however, should not be attributed to the internal laws of technology itself, but to its function within the economy today. Okay, so this is like very similar to Murray Bookchin's criticism of how individual anarchists look at technology, like how people blame technology instead of how it is used. So you can check my my Bookchin's review about this. Like the problem is not technology itself, but the function technology has in an economy that is dominated by monopoly. And it's also important to look at the asterisks here, because in 1944 it says profit economy, whereas here it says economy today. It is important because it allows us to be critical of all kinds of economies, not just profit-oriented economies. After all, the Soviet economy wasn't profit-oriented, yet it managed to create the same oppressive culture. So what they are criticizing is a specific function that technology can be given within economies that make technology do a certain thing. And that is machines should only create more machines. Like things are made for use. Films and songs are made simply for being used, and people as consumers are themselves also machines made for being used by capital. Okay, like this is what technology is doing. In short, technology is reproducing itself to such a level that literally everything turns into a machine. Like technology is making people into technology. Machines are producing machines. And so standardization means that everything must model itself on the model of the machine. Like even individuals must think like they are machines. In the case of human beings, it means that humans must deny themselves the ability to think critically. Like we said with the chapter of the concept of enlightenment. Enlightenment is about a process, and so all elements of self-reflection are excluded. And we said that's what it means to be critical. It's to have self-reflection. And so the The only thing that is left, like the point of a process, is just execution. Like human beings must only become self-conscious insofar as to be aware of whether their critical faculties are stimulated so that they can stop them, right? It's like when today's self-help gurus try to teach techniques to silence bad voices in your head, but here it's the critical voices that you have to silence, right? So whenever you start being critical, you must say, oh shit, that is superstition, I must shut it down, because that would distract you from executing your task. Okay, you must be a process means that all you do is just execute orders. For example, you just execute perform tasks. That's what we mean by execution here. You must perform. I think that's a confusion with the French, because in French performing also says exécuter, so maybe I'm confusing the two. But you have to perform the task. That's what you must do. And so you can see this in a similar way with George Orwell's 1984. Like in the novel 1984, people are trained to instinctively block their thoughts whenever they involve critical thinking or even some basic human needs. And so technology is the tool for that training. Quote, any need which might escape the central control is repressed by that of individual consciousness. So the control of individual consciousness represses any need that is deviant from central control. Anything that thinks differently or aspire to something that cannot be computed cannot be framed within the business mentality, and so it must be repressed by the rationality of the individual himself. And so that's why we don't find any argument in front of the famous "it's all business, it makes money, it attracts more viewers, etc." I mean, there are arguments, there is actually an ocean of arguments, but all of them are seen like manifestations of mana, like a call from primitive times, a call of the sirens, scholastic superstition. And so they use technology to illustrate this, specifically the transition from the telephone to the radio. Adorno and Horkheimer, they say that a telephone is an instrument that allows you to both listen to someone and talk to someone from a distance. And so according to them, the radio is an evolution of the phone, but this time it's only one-sided. Like with the telephone, each person can listen and talk, but with the radio, only one person talks and one person listens. I either listen to someone talking on the radio, or I talk to someone who is listening to the radio. So there is no possible dialogue with the radios. But of course, with the radio, there is a power dynamic, because the talker and the listener are not equal. With the telephone, there is some equality between the two participants, both are subjects, but with the radio, there is no possible equality between listener and talker. The talker always has the upper hand. And so the only equality possible is either between talkers or between listeners. We are either equal among listeners or among talkers, but the listeners and the talkers cannot be equal with each other. So the only thing left to do is to determine who is going to be the talker and who is going to be the listener. And of course, those in power won't be the listeners. They want to be the talkers, and those who don't have power will be the listeners. And so they are the amateurs, those who simply listen and cannot talk because they are ignorant or some shit like that. So the radio, they write, democratically makes everyone equally into listeners in order to expose them in authoritarian fashion to the same programs put out by different stations. No mechanism of reply has been developed, and private transmissions are condemned to unfreedom. So no mechanism of reply has been was developed. There could have been one. I mean, with the technology available to us, we could have easily developed a way to reply, a counterpower to the influence of the radio, in which the listener can retain his status as a subjective participant. So those in power decide what technology to develop, and they go for the ones that serve their interests. So like the case of arguments, there are arguments against the business mentality, but you are not really allowed to develop them. Like trying to reply with arguments to the principle of self-preservation is like trying to talk back to the radio, right? Only a fool would try to talk back to a radio. You know, you must be insane if you try to talk back to a radio. And so the connections with others is severed to such a point that even talking and replying to oneself is impossible. Like we become radios ourselves. Okay, this is what we meant earlier by technology. It's basically machines producing machines. Like we become machines ourselves. Like we do the same thing with ourselves. We deny ourselves the right, you know, to talk with each other, to talk with ourselves, you know. So we become radios. If the point of the radio is to be a medium between the talker and the listener, between the Führer and the people, between the employer and the employee, between the teacher and the pupil, people too can do that to themselves. When you see me in the street and I come to talk to you with my speech, my behavior, my clothes, etc., you must see the CEO, you must see the president, the employer, the teacher, you must see your father. I mean, these figures of authority. Like whenever we interact, we must reproduce the same, you know, the same social hierarchies, the same, you know, social structure. Like our behavior, our appearance, our speech becomes the discourse of the talker, and you are the listener. And so we are radios in that sense. Like we carry with us this ideology of, you know, there is a talker and there is a listener, and the only subjectivity we can have is to tell ourselves that we are radios. So for most of it, subjectivity or spontaneity, I mean, these are what escapes the calculating system. It is transport into talent shows. Like being amateurs, our only worth is determined by a sharp eye of a specialist, of a talker, a judge on a talent show, or a talent spotter. And so they see talent somewhere, and so they absorb it into the industrial process. They organize sponsored events, artistic competitions in which the content of art is only accessory. Like what matters instead is the judge's comment, is how many entries the event had. It's the competition itself. It's not the content. Like when you go to see an art exhibition, the point is not the content of the art. It's rather, you know, everything else. It's how people are going to judge. It's how you behave in an art gallery. It's, you know, status and all of that, but it's never the art itself. So it's like, you know, when you watch a competition, a competing show, like in singing, for example, it's not the songs that matter, but the fact that it is a competition, right? And so art is deprived of any other purpose other than, you know, contributing to the economy of, you know, making more entries, other than, you know, maintaining the process going. I mean, that's the only. It cannot have any process other than that, other than maintaining the process. So the standardization isn't much about producing the same songs or performances, but it is also the process of producing them must be the same everywhere. Okay, so you must produce everything. You must produce the same things, but also with the same process. And so if you want to make art about cooperation, for example, it can only be done in the context of a competition, which, you know, renders the point of the art or its, you know, aura completely obsolete. And so as such, the talent in question was already decided upon from the start. Quote, the talents belong to the operation long before they are put on show, otherwise they would not conform so eagerly. Like the culture industry is basically about preventing any opportunity to think otherwise. Like you are born, you are already once you are born, you already have everything that is already decided upon you. You want to be a musician, you have the talent for it. Well, the journey has already been traced for you by the industry. Like it's the industry who is going to decide what kind of musician you are going to be. or what is the point, of your music. And so the industry will even produce your song if they criticize the industry, as long as it will serve the operation, right? Like you can be very critical of the industry, but if the industry sees in it, potential to make more money, oh yeah, they will produce it. So if people show up to a revolutionary concert, for example, and buy their tickets, the culture industry will shift its production to revolutionary songs, right? So what matters is the recipe. Like the culture industry wants to produce everything with the same recipe. It doesn't really matter what is the content. Like you can make a whole album singing about the greatness of communism. If the culture industry knows that the album is going to sell, yeah, they will produce more of songs about communism. And so it wants to make everything with the same recipe. Like imagine if, for example, you want to make rice like you make pizzas. It wants to make veggie burgers like it makes Big Macs. That's the culture industry. So the whole meeting the needs of the customer is just a pretext for standardizing everything. If it wasn't, the needs of the consumers, it would be something else. Like it would find another excuse to standardize everything. So the real purpose is to diminish thought through standardization. What the culture industry does to the customer is to diminish his thought and thinking abilities, and it justifies it with his needs or his choices. Like here's a passage that shows how this is done. Quote: "If a branch of art follows the same recipe as one far removed from it in terms of its medium and subject matter, if the dramatic denouement in radio soap operas is used as an instructive example of how to solve technical difficulties, which are mastered no less in jam sessions than at the highest levels of jazz, or if a movement from Beethoven is loosely adapted in the same way as a Tolstoy movie is adapted for film, the pretext of meeting the public's spontaneous wishes is mere hot air." So a lot to unpack here. So a branch of art that follows the same recipe as one removed from it is like when you adapt a novel for a movie. All right. You have two mediums, literature and cinema. These are removed from each other because of what they can do. Cinema is a visual art in the sense that it shows images. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the context regarding cinema in the period which Adorno and Horkheimer were writing, cinema's status as art was very far from clear, and even today the debate is still going on. I mean, is cinema art or not? But the reason why cinema was a central interest for them, for Adorno and Horkheimer, is because with cinema you have no room for imagination. I mean, this is how they argue for it. Because there is no effort from the spectator. But in reading a novel, there is an effort to follow the story, especially stories like War and Peace by Tolstoy, for example. So it is demanding to stick to a novel from Tolstoy, and so as such these two mediums shouldn't mix because each one is made for a specific purpose. One is for imagination and the other is for a more pragmatic approach to perception. And so what Adorno and Horkheimer complain about here is that by turning Tolstoy's novels into movies, you make them easier for the public. Instead of reading a 1,000 pages novel in 2 weeks, they can watch a 2-hour movie about it. And so instead of making efforts to imagine the scenes, the culture industry provides them with visuals. It's like the Spark Notes of the 40s. And so cinema takes away what is supposed to be liberating and stimulating with literature, and as such it diminishes the spectator's intellectual abilities. And so the same thing with Beethoven. It's supposed to be played in a specific context. It demands some sensitivity to music that has to be cultivated and worked upon for a long time in order to appreciate it. It cannot be adapted to a looser medium to make it more, accessible, let's say, to the customer. Now, we can say that this is an elitist view of culture, like there is a high culture and a lower culture. And yeah, you're right. Adorno was a musicologist, and he loathed he hated how classical music and classical culture in general was being, downgraded by the culture industry. He saw in them the potential for stimulating the intellectual capacities of people, and that will make them, into resistant. It will make them, resistant against authoritarianism and against the culture industry. So it's understandable that they get worried when they say that high culture isn't safe from the recipe of the culture industry, either through adaptation to lower mediums, let's say, or by the conformity to the soap opera model. When they say that dramatic radio soap operas are used as an instructive model for solving technical difficulties, they're referring to something in particular. Like in the asterisk there, the note says it alludes to the fact that such programs were originally broadcast at times when housewives were at home doing their washing. So soap operas are about the kind of drama that upper class people who are bored would enjoy. It's about, spilling the tea, let's say. It's about drama, and so soap operas are instructive in many ways here. It is instructive in the sense that when you have technical difficulties, you're supposed to solve them in a dramatic way, instead of talking down, instead of taking down the social structure causing the boredom, for example. You can just make your life exciting by being a drama queen whenever the toaster doesn't work, for example. It's a way of instructing in the sense that it reinforces gender rules and gender stereotypes, for example. And like soap operas, it's chaotic. There are screams and tears. Everyone gets offended for no reasons. People are bitchy for no reason. The dialogues are stupid. The storyline makes no sense. Like, I don't know if you know the YouTube show Telenovas are Hell. It's a show where they do summaries of the most absurd soap opera scenarios. So you can go and check it to have some laughs. Like, it's way over the top. Like, the drama is way over the top, and so soap operas are completely random, and they don't make any sense actually, and therefore their ending is always anticlimactic. Like, it ends because at one point it had to end, right? And so Adorno and Horkheimer compare them to jam sessions and to jazz. Like, Adorno doesn't like jazz, he doesn't like jazz at all. He even wrote a famous essay on jazz in which he basically argues that jazz is fascism. I mean, I'll do a close reading of it one day because it's a fun read. But the reason why he makes this comparison is because jam sessions for him are basically pointless. It's just a bunch of guys who meet to hit some notes, and so the point of jam session is actually the session. It's the fact that it is happening, that we are jamming. That's what matters, and it's not what we are jamming about that matters. And as for jazz, it's chaotic. Adorno sees it as chaotic. Its chaotic nature, like the fact that it's all about improvisation, makes Adorno pretty uncomfortable with it, because it's like, the buildings that are shooting from all sides. It takes the whole place in an unfettered way, and it doesn't let any note be itself. Like, as soon as a note is heard, it's silenced, and another one with no connection to the precedent note starts. And so jazz, soap operas, jam sessions, adaptations of Beethoven and Tolstoy, the talent spotters, etc. They are all the same, according to Adorno. They obey the same rhythm, they produce the same ideology, and so they standardize absolutely everything. When you hear jazz, you are supposed to hear Beethoven or read Tolstoy, and so everything must be produced on the model of a jam session, not because of the needs of the customers, but because of the needs of the apparatus itself. Like, its mode of selection isn't based on consumer choices or needs, but on what would work economically for it, for the apparatus. And so once it works, due to its monopoly on technology, it appeals to the consumer's needs. Like, I'm in charge, I want to make money, and I don't want people to question my authority, so I produce something that is safe for me. And since I own most distribution networks, I make it so that people cannot watch anything else. And so I make sure that I produce a few things that look different, but I produce them using the same recipe. That way, no one will complain that I'm not, giving them choices. So people turn up, I make tons of money, and some intellectuals will complain that it's bullshit and I'm exploiting people's autonomy, etc. But I don't really give a shit, and I can always stop those criticism by just saying it's the customer's need. Like, I just have to play that card, and I'm free to go. So in reality, it's the interest of those in power and the apparatus's nature that determine the mechanism of selection. Anything that do not conform to the tables of the economy is viewed with suspicion, and it won't get a pass at the big screen. It's only when it proved to be compatible with the apparatus that movies about, for example, social justice became a thing. The apparatus makes sure that dismantling it would be impossible because it has its tentacles everywhere and in everything. By totalizing itself, it made it so that removing the slightest element to it would lead to a catastrophe everywhere. And so this is what globalism is, after all. Capitalism has spread itself to all corners of the world, that if you change the economic system of one country at the other side of the globe, everything would come crashing down. And so whenever a country wants to leave the global capitalist market, for example, it finds itself in a web of unwanted ties with all other countries that won't let it leave. And it too finds itself unable to leave, since it relies on those ties with those other countries in the first place. And so culture production is in the same position. Artists and intellectuals find themselves having to rely on those who exploit them in order to produce anything. A painter would rather paint something that he hates rather than dying hungry without ever finishing one damn painting. So everything that is around them is owned by some sort of chairman of the board that decide what to do with the material, with the culture production, and so everyone must comply. When the board chairman controls the steel, the petroleum, the chemicals, the electricity, and you want to make a movie, well, you soon find yourself at their mercy, and as such they have to keep you have to keep up with them. Like, culture monopolies must become companies too. Culture itself becomes a brand that has to sell itself and prove itself to be potent on the market. So everything becomes one huge, big, giant, homogeneous sphere. Quote, the dependence of the most powerful broadcasting company on the electrical industry or of film on the banks characterizes the whole sphere, the individual sectors of which are themselves economically intertwined. Everything is so tightly clustered that the concentration of intellect reaches a level where it overflows the demarcations between company names and technical sectors. So this relentless unity paradoxically blurred all lines and distinctions. As we said earlier, there is no high and low culture. There is only the culture industry. A movie like A movies or B movies are now the same. They are just movies. Novels or magazines are both literature, and so politics too is unified in that sense. Like, differences are manufactured, like we said. Divergencies in opinions are constructed on the models of the culture industry, whether the US or the Nazis or the USSR, Italy, Tunisia. They are all obeying the same sphere of the culture industry, and so individuality, taste, behavior, intellect, etc., all manufactured by the same industry. And so the culture industry is a culture of sameness disguised as difference. Like, for difference to be sameness, it needs to be manageable by the same recipe that makes everything else. And as such, everyone gets to be someone special, but how special they are is determined in advance through their data. Like, depending on the classification, organization, and identification of of individuals as consumers, individuals will be allowed the right degree of level of being special. Quote, something is provided for everyone so that no one can escape. Differences are hammered home and propagated. Everyone is supposed to behave spontaneously according to a level determined by indices and to select the category of mass product manufactured for their type. On the charts of research organizations indistinguishable from those of political propaganda, consumers are divided up as statistical material into red, green, and blue areas according to income group. So this is like, Facebook selling your data to companies so that they sell you stuff, or for the YouTube algorithm. Just like, the artist cannot escape from the electric company, individuals cannot escape the groups that they are assigned to. And so the result is a pseudo diversity that no one can actually, experience. We're told that this diversity exists, that there is difference, that we have, a society of personal fulfillment, that everyone is different just because we have classifications and hierarchies. So the apparatus knows that it won't difference because we are different, but because it's an apparatus of sameness, it needs to integrate difference within it, and as such it simply reflects the illusion of difference. You just you just open a screen and you see a diversity of ad where people of different ethnicities and genders are happy, and so you as a minority, you are supposed to think to yourself like, hey, that's good, diversity exists, the system works, but that's just it. You just contemplate that image, you contemplate the idea of diversity, but you never get to really experience it. It's therefore like brands. When you have the same product in all Walmart sections, the only thing that distinguishes them is the name of the brand. There is no difference between the engines of General Motors and Chrysler, or the car of Ford or Renault, between the movies of Warner Bros. Or Netflix, or between the shows on HBO and the shows on Hulu, between the news on CNN or on Fox, between the Al Jazeera or BFM TV, between iPhone or Nokia, PS or Xbox. It's kind of like Sheldon in The Big Bang Theory when he couldn't decide between a PS5 or an Xbox One. He's with his girlfriend Amy, and he spends hours trying to decide which one to take, and Amy doesn't care. For her, it's just for gaming. And the more Sheldon points to the differences between the two, the more similar the PS5 and the Xbox appear to Amy. And this is what the authors mean by when you have people debating over differences between two options in the culture industry. They say the advantages and disadvantages debated by enthusiasts serve only to perpetuate the appearance of competition and choice. So the point of all of this is to keep the production of competition, that people feel that they do have choices, that differences really matter, that there are high stakes in any of this, like the debates over the difference between the PS5 and the Xbox One the debate seems ridiculous because the differences don't really matter, but for the enthusiasts, it's like their lives are on the line. Compare to that. To people who really had their lives on the line during revolutions to actually bring some changes by their blood, or people fleeing their oppressive homes and losing loved ones in the process. Compare that to people who are just debating over differences. Like television leads to this loss of stakes while also maintaining this ridicule play of competition alive. Like the point of television is to realize what Richard Wagner tried, the total work of art. It's a synthesis of all of the most numbing mediums in the culture industry, which is cinema and radio. Whereas Wagner's work of art aimed at something else entirely, the synthesis of the television, the synthesis that the television seeks is the monopoly of art production. Like the spectator must be passive to the point where by looking at a TV, at a TV episode, he will consume all mediums at once. And so the regression of effort and the exploitation of the economic mindset of efficiency and self-preservation cannot be higher than in TV. I mean, and now we can say that TikTok and Instagram have taken it to a whole other level. But that's because this is because the culture industry, well, it's actually good at synthesis. Adorno and Horkheimer mention Wagner's opera Tristan, based on the legend of Tristan und Isolde, and they say the accord between word, image, and music is achieved so much more perfectly than in Tristan, because the sensuous elements, which compliantly document only the surface of social reality, are produced in principle within the same technical work process, the unity of which they express as their true content. So like we said, Wagner was trying to create the total work of art, an art that synthesizes all forms of art. In opera, you're supposed to find everything: theater, dance, poetry, singing, etc. But because these are brought together by human beings, the coordination can be limited. Human beings are not perfect in the sense that they each have their own particularity that makes it impossible to fit them in a whole. So when you try to bring everyone together, of course you cannot make something that is perfect unless you remove what makes each individual distinct. And so it's like in Rick and Morty, where they're introduced to the entity that is called unity. That Rick used to date this entity that is called unity, and it is an alien life that takes control over people's mind. But then it creates the most harmonious and peaceful society because everyone is acting in unity with everyone. But it's the same mind that is doing doing everything. So unity in Rick and Morty has that capacity of tuning each individual with others, like in the opera that Wagner tries to tune words with images and choreographics and music. And Wagner did achieve to some extent his total work of art, as Adorno seems to suggest with Tristan. I don't know, I never really watched the opera, so I cannot confirm, but the culture industry does it better than Wagner, because it doesn't care about subjectivities. It doesn't even care about anything else, unlike, Unity, who still shows compassion towards the species that she controls. And at least, Unity achieves actual peace. The culture industry, on the other hand, achieves fascism. And the reason why the culture industry manages to do that is because it doesn't really care about the intellect. It only cares about the surface of social realities. It just wants to show you what you can already see with your eyes and hear with your ears. It doesn't show you the things that you do not see, the things that you do not hear, like the social structures, the systems of oppression, the ideology, etc. Those are things that you can see only through critical theory. And so the culture industry manages to make a unity in television between words, images, and music because they're all sensuous elements. They're about, immediate experience, not about the depth that can cause, disharmony in the whole. Again, what causes disharmony among human beings is that on the outside we may be similar, but on the inside our ideas, subjectivities, cognitive processes, values, etc., these things are not visible on our skins. The culture industry wants to make them visible so that it can turn them into immediate perception. And so once they become that, they become manageable. And so for a system that works like an AI, to which you ask to make you can ask an AI to make you a painting, it makes you a painting. It simply sees all of the elements, words, images, sound as pieces of the same puzzle. So they are produced by the same process, the same technical work. They are the work of an AI, and their content is nothing else but that, mechanical unity. And so the shows on TV are supposed to produce just that, a mechanical unity. That is their content. It is Like the culture industry is like a big AI that is not just confined in the virtual world, but is physically there. It is physically here. It is present through the media, through the coal and electric industries, through movies, through architecture, etc. It's all about achieving unity at the expense of individuality. And so TV, according to the authors, manages this feat better than any other medium. As they say, this work process integrates all the elements of production from the original concept of the novel, shaped by its sidelong glance at film, to the last sound effect. It is the triumph of invested capital. So the triumph of capital here means that at the end, people must understand that they cannot stop capital from growing and taking away their jobs as in their activities. Work, despite its problems, was still considered a way for individuals to claim their independence, that they cannot be replaced because of their skills. But capital proves that with progress, what they do, machines can do them better in better coordination and in shorter amount of time. And so the point of movies and TV is to get that point across. It's not the plot or anything that matters. The point is capital is your true master and you are replaceable. So that's for the first section of the culture industry, and hopefully you find it helpful for you when you want to read the chapter. And I will see you next time for the second section of the culture industry. Like I said, I'm going to do 7 videos because there are 7 sections. So yeah, as always, thanks for watching.